Hi and welcome. This is a review of The Rings of Power, Season 1, Episode 3, named Ada. Okay, in this episode we pick up where the last one left off. We have Elendil, who turns out to be the captain of the ship that picks up Galadriel and Halbrand. What happens is we have this kind of ridiculous thing on his boat where Galadriel wakes up from sleeping, comes up topside, and demands to know where they're going. And Elendil basically, tells him to go pound sand. Halbrand asks a similar question, same answer. Anyway, they end up in Numenor. And this is the court, and we can see here Galadriel and Halbrand and Elendil, the captain. And this is the court of Numenor, where we meet the Queen, Regent. So there she is. And of course, Galadriel announces herself with all of her titles, blah, blah, blah. She's an elf. She comes off incredibly arrogant to the Queen Regent, and so the Queen is pissed off at her and at the fact that she's an elf, and kind of pissed off at Elendil for bringing an elf to Numenor in the first place. Galadriel points out to the Queen Regent that, well, it's the elves that gave you this island in the first place, so. And of course, her arrogance just pisses off the whole court. Where they want to put them in jail. But Halbrand reasons with the Queen and asks them to make a decision on whether they can go to Middle Earth. And please allow us 3 days. And so they grant Halbrand's request, even though they're pissed off at Galadriel. Okay. And then we have the Elves Are Captured. How this happens, no one explains. It's not only him that's captured, our Legolas type elf here, but it's like all his men he was with, his company, if you will, or whatever they are, squad, whatever they're called. None of this is explained, but they're in this trench system, basically a giant hole in the ground, with the orcs. So the orcs have captured all of these people. And I assume there are humans there too from the town that was destroyed, but as usual, nothing is explained in this show. You're supposed to guess. Either they're over-explaining stuff in this show, or they don't explain anything, and they leap you forward like 100 years. It gets kind of confusing. But anyway, they're all here captured, and obviously they want to escape. The thing that doesn't make any sense is it's daylight and the orcs are working in daylight. Orcs can't be in daylight or they get killed. So, not sure about this one. Yes, they have some sort of coverings over their trench, but that should not matter because the light still comes through the coverings and they're still exposed to sunlight, which means they die. None of this makes any sense. It doesn't follow through with anything in any of Tolkien's books and his description of orcs. Also, these orcs are extremely light-skinned, which makes really no sense to me. Orcs are supposed to be dark and evil. So the elves are chained all up, and they're being terrorized by the orcs. And there's this whole scene where the orc gives them water. And while they're drinking, the orcs slaughter the the ones that are drinking some water, with the exception of course, him. And so, I don't know. It's just all, like, stupid, to be quite honest with you. Um, Moving on. So then we have Elendil telling Galadriel about a library and how he is friendly to elves and his family are friendly to elves. He actually speaks the elven tongue and talks to her in Elvish. And so he is taking her in this scene to the library, and they have this really stupid scene sequence of her riding a horse and smiling, where she looks really odd and weird, and I don't get it. It makes no sense. I mean, they should just have her riding a horse, getting on her horse and riding, and that's it. Just like they do in, the Lord of the Rings. Gandalf gets on a horse and he rides. That's it. Done. No, they stretched this scene out. They slowed it down. She looks ridiculous on the horse, just because of her expressions on her face, where they have these like ridiculous close-ups in slow-mo, which is really stupid. Not sure who signed off on that one, but it doesn't help the episode. The other thing about this episode is that this episode is incredibly boring. And I mean boring. Boring to the point that I actually fell asleep watching this show. That's how boring it is. This is Isildur. So we meet Isildur, and he is taking some maritime test, being a sailor, and that's really what's going on with him. Nothing exciting going on, just really talk about seamanship, blah, blah, blah. Boring. And when we get to the library, Galadriel is given a parchment that was a report from a human from hundreds of years ago, whatever. And it has on it, allegedly, Sauron's plan. And from the sigil that they have here, Galadriel puts this to the map and notices that this is land in the southern part of Middle Earth, and it's marked off as Sauron's land. Wow, Mordor, eh? None of this makes any sense at all. Last time I checked, Galadriel and the elves was searching for what? I don't know, several hundred years, maybe even 1,000 years for Sauron. And they couldn't find him, yet Elendil in a library pulls out a burnt parchment and hands it to her, and then all of a sudden she has this epiphany or whatever. It's just idiotic. Bad plot planning. Just really stupid. I mean, it basically shows that the elves must be complete morons, that they never found this parchment, or that they never discovered that the sigil is actually land, because the land on the map looks just like it. None of this makes any sense. Really sad. I was really astonished at the stupidity of this. Just saying, the writers really, I don't know, they need to get their act together or something, because this is really bad. Okay, so we find that out in the library. And there's also talk of a king that used to be there that gave up his throne, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, I'm going to take this part out of sequence here because, like I said, I fell asleep watching this. So bear with me. So we have this, the elves have some type of plan to try to get out of the trench, whatever. And so they have this big fight sequence that takes place between them, the orcs, and one of their wolvish, strange-looking animals. And so elves are fighting, and they're getting killed left and right, which makes no sense. And of course, this guy is the only one that can fight for some reason. They have this whole scene that's kind of interesting where he splits a piece of wood that's like holding up a tent, and it falls on top of the orcs. Okay, that was cool. I like that scene, but none of it really makes any sense. Okay, none of these elves who are these are the warrior elves in his squad, company, whatever you want to call it, none of them can fight. They all get immediately destroyed by the orcs, except for this guy. There is one elf that makes it out of the trench as this battle is going on, only to be killed, of course, by arrows, black arrows from the other orcs. And this guy gets to our Legolas-like elf. I know I'm just calling him that because he clearly is supposed to be a Legolas-type character in this show. He, of course, he gets to the top of the trench and looks around, sees his friend get killed by the arrows and notices that it's all a barren wasteland. All the trees have been destroyed, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? They're in Mordor. What a shock. They're building Mordor is what these orcs are doing, who are out in the sunlight, as we can see here, which really makes no sense because they would be killed by the sunlight. So they're out in the sunlight, not getting burned to a crisp. They must... I don't know how they're doing this because it's not possible, okay? The only type of orc, which aren't even orcs, right, are Rurikrai, which were invented by Saruman. Those are the only ones that can go out in daylight and not be destroyed. So I don't get any of this. So, but whatever. And then we're taken to the hobbits, half-foots, or whatever they're called. Okay, I don't know why they're even in this show. Okay, they serve no purpose. There is nothing going on here. They're getting ready to migrate. Who cares? I don't care. Why they're depicted constantly as these dirty, like homeless people, I don't understand. Okay, why aren't they well dressed like the hobbits in The Lord of the Rings or in the story The Hobbit? I picked out a scene here that the best scene I can see of them being dressed, because I'm sick of seeing them looking dirty and disgusting. But it's utterly ridiculous, the way they're depicted. So I don't get it. Okay, and I don't see the purpose of them in this show. Okay, they have the Gandalf-type character with them, and the big thing with him is he tells them he's their friend. Like I said, this part I slept through. I had to wake up, I had to re-watch it, and it's just pathetic and awful. I just should have slept through it. There's no reason for anybody for this to be in the show. Alright, moving along. The important part of the show, I think, anyway, outside of the fact that they got to Numenor and Galadriel figured out that where Mordor is, finally, after several hundred years or whatever, Halbrand, it turns out, is the king. He is a real king. Obviously, he abdicated. And so Galadriel has the seal of the king. She got it from the library. And so she shows it to him. And, of course, he's wearing it around his neck. That's what he wears around his neck, is his seal. And he says, I got it off a guy that was dead. And Galadriel says to him, I know you're the king. And then he explains to Galadriel, well, my ancestors pledged their entire bloodline to Mordor. And so she says to him, well, you can overcome that, blah, blah, blah. I need you to come with me to Middle-earth. And he's very reluctant to do any of this. It doesn't seem like he wants to go back and do any of this stuff. he actually is extremely interested, for whatever reason, in being a blacksmith, if you will, someone that learns how to forge stuff. He's extremely interested that there's a scene in this episode where he is talking to one of the smiths, and the smith says to him, well, you need to be in our craftsman's club or guild or whatever, and you need this seal from the guild. And so Halbrand goes out and steals a guild brand, a guild medal, whatever they call it, and ends up in a big fight, and then ends up in jail, and that's where Galadriel is talking to him. The show ends with the elf being recaptured. They go back to the elves, and the elf is spared to be alive. Yes, Mr. Legolas in this show, because he's going to meet the leader of the orcs. I think that's who it's supposed to be, but who knows. All of this is bizarre. This show is incredibly boring. They have like what I call filler scenes. All right, when they first get to Numenor, they just show like all this city scenes of Numenor that go on way too long. Too many minutes used on that. We have that whole horse scene with Galadriel riding the horse. That is utterly ridiculous. Incredibly long. These are all like pauses in the show. It's just ridiculous. And we have the migration with the hobbits, and just the entire part with the hobbits, which there's no point in them being in the show, because once again, Tolkien said that the Harfoots don't do anything in this entire age. Nothing significant happens with them, so they don't even belong in this show. I don't get it. So like I said, there's a lot of scenes in this. This show is over an hour, this episode. Really could have been condensed down to 45 minutes. It would have been a lot more entertaining, and I would have been able to stay awake for it. But incredibly boring show. If they had cut it down to at least 45 minutes, maybe even 40 minutes, it would have at least been a little better. Dialogue's really horrible. And once again, Galadriel just comes off as someone that you hate. Her arrogance is unbelievable. Just not a likable character at all. I actually find Halbrand to be a likable character. And Elendil, also likable. Even the Queen, Regent of Numenor, is a likable character compared to Galadriel. So it's just so, I don't know. It's just so bizarre. I would like to like this show, but I mean, I don't know. This particular episode is worse than the first two, I think, just in boredom. I would give this particular episode on my 5-star scale a 2. I sat through this, so you didn't have to. If you enjoy these videos, please subscribe. Tell your friends about it. Have them subscribe. Hit the like button. Until next time, bye-bye.